go ahead. I'm gonna go ahead and open it up officially. So this is our March Provider Forum, and we have Dr. Melissa Olive presenting today on ABA therapy and the provider side of that. So I'm gonna let Melissa kind of introduce herself and make her the host. If you do have questions, put them in the chat or raise your hand and we will get to them as soon as we can. So let me go here and there you go.
All right, thank you. Let's see, share. And you should be able to see my screen now. That's not what we want to see. Let's try this again. Share. Why is it not showing? Oh, there we go. Okay. You'll see faces for people who are sharing. So hi, I'm Dr. Melissa Olive. It is very nice to be here. And as I was saying before the formal introduction, I am relatively new to Florida. My husband and I got here as fast as we could. Our youngest, my bonus child, I call her, graduated in the summer of 22. And so we got down here on July 4th. July 3rd-ish. So again, she graduated in June. We got here in July. We came as fast as we could, just in time for the big hurricane and some other exciting things. What I do want to say, I have a long history, and so I really can sort of spare you all the gory details. I have a slide dedicated to all the things that I've done and where I've come from. I do wear two hats right now, well, three if you count my personal hat. But I am the executive director of FABA, which is the Florida Association for Behavior Analysis. That's how I came to meet Dina, was through our mutual connection at the ARCA Florida. But I did want to just give a shout out to FABA because we are the state association of for behavior analysis, and we are affiliated with a national chapter, which is called the Association for Behavior Analysis International. So it is a worldwide organization representing behavior analysts worldwide. And then we're also an affiliate chapter of the Association for Professional Behavior Analysts. I am working with my board to also become an affiliate of the ARCA Florida. But our purpose is to promote ethical, humane, and effective application of behavioral principles in all segments of society, including education, business, rehab facilities, and government. We do have a annual conference. It's hybrid and it's quite large. We had about 1,800 folks last year, and every year we tend to get a few more, but we do also just want to promote the profession in the best way possible. I am not here speaking on behalf of FABA or my other employer, which is Adapt for Life Applied Behavior Analysis Services. We currently provide services in Kentucky and Indiana, but I live down here and one of the owners lives over on the other side of Florida. And so we will be beginning services down here at some point. We don't have a start date, but it is on our radar. So just a little bit about me. I have been doing ABA since I was an adolescent, and I am not kidding. I'm old as mud. And so that's a very, very, very long time. My brother was born in 1979. And by the time he was 2, we were actively getting ABA treatment. So this was long before the famous research papers came out. My mom drove us one way, 45 minutes, to participate in a parent training program. So parents trained her how to do ABA, and then she, instead of paying, she then paid back by training other parents to do ABA. And as a sibling, I was there and they thought I was great with kids. And so I learned how to do ABA as well. And I said the profession chose me. I did not choose this profession. I am licensed to practice behavior analysis in 5 states. And that includes Connecticut, where I lived before I came here, Kentucky, where we're providing services today. Louisiana, because a family needed me to come there to help their child learn to eat. New York, because it bumps up to Connecticut and it was quite difficult to get licensed in New York. And also Texas, because I actually worked in Texas for almost 10 years before I moved to Connecticut. My brother teaches me and taught me more than anyone, any class or any textbook. His name is Mac. I'll show you a picture of him in a second, but he continues even to today to teach me. He moved in with me when he was 13, which made me not very old at that time. And then he's lived with me or near me ever since. So that includes moving to Minnesota to get my PhD, moving to Nevada for my first academic position, moving to Texas for my second academic position, and then moving to Connecticut to be with my now husband. And then, of course, he moved down here when we moved down here. And as you know, taking your loved one across states brings its own barriers and issues. And so I quit my job for the first year we were here and just provided care to him. And so he is now in an ICF at a company called Sunrise. And I could not be happier with the fact that how we lined up. It's not the first place we got services in Florida, but I definitely appreciate how they work with us to meet my brother's unique needs. So I'm a sibling, I'm a student, I was a professor, a researcher, a practitioner, another researcher. Then I opened my own business in Connecticut. I sold that business. And now I'm a business executive for the second time. So it's a lot. So my sweet dad passed away back in October. And these are my three brothers. Mac here next to me is the one who has taught me the most. And then these are my two loves of my life. This is Norm, my husband, and Mac. We went to visit my goddaughter in Kentucky. And of course, my husband likes to sip bourbon. And so we were at a distillery, and this was a pretend photo of them cheersing together. Mackie cannot have alcohol because he takes a lot of seizure medications, but it sure did make for a very handsome picture. But it shows you he's standing up in Norma's setting. So it shows you how quite petite he is. So today we're going to talk a little bit about the myths of ABA. We're going to talk about the ABCs of behavior. We'll go over some key terms. We'll talk about what should you see when you're looking at ABA programs or collaborating with ABA programs across the state, and then just kind of the services that ABA providers can provide. And then we'll have plenty of time for questions. So let's start with some of these myths. A lot of people think that all we do is fix bad behavior. So the first myth I want to dispel is that we actually teach more behaviors. We teach new behaviors to replace the bad behaviors. We teach new behaviors to help individuals become independent. And we want every individual to reach their maximum capacity. Everybody's got a different capacity level, but we want to help everybody get to that maximum level that they possibly can. So we want to increase behavior and decrease behavior. We also want behavior to maintain over time. So after we stop providing therapy, we need those skills to stay in their skill set, and we need to see generalization. So we want to see those behaviors in the communities where the individuals live, in their homes, in their schools, at church, at the grocery store. We don't want to just fix it when we're there, maybe working in one little space. Some people also say that ABA is bribery, and it is not bribery. None of you work for free. All of you get a paycheck, and your employer is not bribing you to come to work. Your employer pays you for a service that you provide to them. In ABA, you get a reinforcer for a targeted behavior. And so whether it's peeing on the potty, or whether it's feeding yourself, or whether it's asking for help, you get a reinforcer for that behavior. Sometimes it's an artificial reinforcer, like a check mark or a sticker or a token. Other times it's an authentic reinforcer, like a high five or a squeeze or a pat on the back. And still other times it might be in the form of a token or money. again, depending on what you have set the system up to be. Another myth is that people think that ABA is only for people with disabilities. And my husband is a perfect example. He does not have any identified disabilities, and ABA works great on him. ABA also works great with your pets, right? And it works on children with and without disabilities. Most parents use aspects of ABA even without formal training on it. They may not necessarily use it properly, but they are using some of those behavioral strategies. For example, one of the longest ABA strategies on the books is called Grandma's Rule. First, you eat your peas, and then you can have your vegetables, right? We've all had someone tell us that at some point in our life. That is Grandma's Rule. It's based on a principle called the Premack principle, and it was created, established, discovered by Dr. Premack. And so it is one of our very common procedures that we will say, first you do this, then you get that. There's also a group of folks who are trying to create a myth that all ABA is abusive. And I'm here to tell you that all ABA is not abusive. Everything that my brother got as a young child was perfectly appropriate for what we knew at the time. Looking back, we've learned new things, and we don't use those procedures anymore. For example, when he was a spitter, our psychologist taught us to shake money in a can, right? As an aversive. Today, we don't do aversives. Today, we use positive behavior interventions and supports. We teach replacement behaviors, and we reinforce the behaviors that we want to see. We all know that there are stories of doctors, dentists, massage therapists, all of these paid professionals that have engaged in abusive acts with their patients. That doesn't make the entire profession abusive. And so we know that some people have experienced some very bad things under the direction of people who either weren't qualified, weren't licensed, weren't properly trained. And we agree that those types of practices need to stop. But ABA itself is not abusive. And that is why we can't say all ABA is abusive. I also catch wind that in some organizations, the ABA providers make all of the decisions. Also a myth. In the process of ABA, decisions are made jointly with all of the stakeholders and the provider. And the parent/guardian is the #1 decision maker if the person themselves is not able to vocally or verbally advocate for their wishes. So the parent guardian would be that voice on their behalf. It should all be done as a team and never as just the provider. Some people think that ABA is a bag of tricks. And when you see really good ABA happening, it makes you feel like, oh, that must just be like tricking people into doing things. The science itself is quite amazing in how it works, but it does have to be planned out and carefully executed. Some people also think that ABA was created by Lovaas. Lovaas actually was the first person to take the practice of ABA and apply it on young children with autism. But prior to that, he actually provided ABA with adults like my brother. And he applied it with children because he had the hypothesis that their brains were more malleable and that if he got the intervention in place, they were less likely to lose those skills. And in fact, that's what it showed, that if you taught those skills early, they were much more likely to maintain over time. He based his work off of our original behavioral folks, which date back to Thorndike and Watson. ABA uses shock and other aversive punishers. So many, many years ago, that those are procedures that people investigated because they didn't know better. Now we know better, and we have moved away from shock and also aversive interventions. And instead, we use PBIS, positive behavior interventions and supports, that focuses on teaching replacement behaviors, reinforcing appropriate behaviors, and teaching skills so that learners don't have to engage in problem behavior to have their needs met. The ABAI, which is the international group, has put out a position statement opposing electric skin shock. ABA can always solve any problem. That too is also a myth. ABA addresses observable and measurable behaviors. We don't deal with thoughts and issues within mental health. That's for other clinicians and other behavioral health providers. We work on behaviors that we can see, count, measure, and reinforce. And finally, ABA can be learned simply by reading about it, and you can't, right? You can try, but chances are it might get misused. And so that's why we strongly advocate for appropriate training of personnel who are implementing ABA procedures, whether it's an RBT, a registered behavior technician, a BCABA, which is an assistant behavior analyst, or a full-fledged behavior analyst. You can get someone to my level who actually has a PhD or doctoral level in behavior analysis, but it takes practice and feedback and practice and feedback to get really good at implementing. So today, I'm not going to necessarily teach you how to do ABA, but I hope that you'll walk away with an understanding of what it is, and then you can work with providers to get better at implementing techniques yourself. So I said we were going to talk about the ABCs of behavior, and here we are. We've got our A's, we've got our B's, and we've got our C's. So A stands for antecedent, which is all the stuff that happens before the behavior. B is the behavior, and we can focus on any behavior, whether it's my Starbucks drinking behavior or whether it's Mac's spitting behavior. And then C is the consequence or the thing that happens after behavior. So we have other things that happen even before the immediate antecedent, which can be a setting event. So lack of sleep, hunger, or environmental issues such as being cold, right? Being scared, having some PTSD, trauma impact. Those things also serve as antecedents, but they may not be immediate antecedents, and they all influence behavior. So this is that chart, and now I've moved over just a little bit more to the right. The antecedent is still here, the behavior is still here, and the consequence is still here. Now I'm introducing two terms that you've probably already heard in your life: reinforcement and punishment. I'm going to teach you how to know the difference between the two. So reinforcement and punishment can only happen after an antecedent and a behavior and a consequence have occurred. So you have an ABC, and then what happens after is the reinforcing effect or the punishment effect. Reinforcement, by definition, is when the behavior increases or stays the same, which is the definition of maintenance. So the definition of reinforcement is when the behavior increases after an antecedent behavior and consequence. The definition of punishment is when the behavior decreases after an antecedent behavior and a consequence. We can have planned reinforcement, and we can have planned punishment. We can have accidental reinforcement or accidental punishment. I'm just going to mute my other computer because it's being super naughty right now. And even though I put it on Do Not Disturb, it's still making sounds. I'm going to give you some examples of accidental punishment. So when a little guy is at school and the teacher is trying to have calendar time or circle time, but one of the students in the circle time smacks his friend, his neighbor. The teacher tries to implement a timeout procedure, which is a punishment procedure. And the teacher says, you know what, Missy, you smacked your friend. You need to go to timeout. And so the little child leaves the circle time and goes over to some area in the room. It could be a quiet area. It could be an area where there's toys or access to other things. But over there, other things are happening that actually might be more preferable than what happens in circle time. But the teacher doesn't understand that because, right, circle time is supposed to be fun and they're learning and that's what kids are supposed to do. And why would they want to go over there and be by themselves? Well, if you work with children with autism or other social challenges, they don't want to be in this circle time with their friends. They might feel too close. They might not like the way their friend smells. They may not like the teacher. And so they've learned if I smack my neighbor, I get to go take a break. Because guess what? I probably also don't know how to ask for a break. And so now I'm off over there having the time of my life, missing circle. So tomorrow when it's time for circle, guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to smack my friend again and go get my break because I don't know better. All I know is this works, right? The smacking my friend works to get me my break. When we could simply teach the person to ask for a break, touch a break card, touch a computer button that says I need a break, and we could generate the same response. But the teacher, because they haven't had training in ABA, they're using an ABA procedure incorrectly. And so they accidentally reinforced the smacking behavior. So when a challenging behavior gets worse and worse and worse, something in the environment is accidentally reinforcing it. Now, accidental punishment. Sometimes we can embarrass children or we can put some on them and their social behavior might accidentally get suppressed. And that would result in that behavior not happening again in the future. And so we do have to be very careful and make our best choices, even though we might not realize, oh, Missy's shy. I don't want to call her out in class because that will make her get embarrassed and that will make her not want to raise her hand anymore. And so I'm going to give you some other examples of how it works in the world. Let's start with something as simple as me going to Starbucks. I told you we were going to talk about my Starbucks behavior. And in this situation, before there was an app for that, I used to go to Starbucks and I would get my specialty drink, which is a hot latte. Even in the dead of summer, I drink hot latte. So hot latte with almond milk, sugar-free vanilla, right? And it takes a while because you got to order it and then they have to make it and then you have to pay and tip and then your drink comes and then you get to leave. So now you're in there for minutes, right? 10, 15 minutes, depending on how busy the Starbucks is. And then they created the app and I'm like, oh, look at that. I can make Missy's specialty, have it ready to go, order it ahead of time. When I get to the Starbucks, I walk in, I've already tipped in the app, get my drink and go. It takes seconds. So guess what happened to my Starbucks drinking behavior when the app came out? It went through the roof. I began consuming it on a regular basis because I could have my drink the way I wanted it in seconds. And Starbucks knew what they were doing. They on purpose created this app to make it easy for us so that we would continue to get our fix. So they reinforced my behavior, which resulted in an increase in me ordering Starbucks. Let's turn this around to a negative reinforcement activity. Oh, we haven't talked about those words. The positive and the negative come right back to this consequence in the middle. Was something added or was something removed? So if we're looking at my Starbucks behavior, something was added, right? Starbucks they added the app. I ordered my coffee and I got my coffee the way I liked it and I got it faster every time. So the act of getting my coffee faster was the consequence. But now let's look at a baby. Let's look at a baby who's coming onto table food and learning how to eat all the awesomeness that table food offers us, right? So mama comes in with a nice big bite of pureed broccoli. Baby goes, turns their head, swats the spoon. Guess what mama does? Mama pulls the broccoli away. Oh, you don't like broccoli. So mama comes back in with peaches, right? Baby loves a fruit. Yum, 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 yum. Here comes the broccoli. Baby's like, all of this behavior that we don't want to see. And what does mama do? she pulls the broccoli back again. So the act of pulling the broccoli back and offering sweets encourages the baby to do this behavior, which is one of the very first nonverbal behaviors that kids ever develop, the no-no behavior, right? And it actually comes from avoiding non-preferred foods. So mama accidentally negatively reinforces her baby by pulling that broccoli back. She's pulling it away. She's taking it away. And the increase of this no, no, no behavior is what happens next. Now, I don't like to go down positive and negative punishment because I really don't like to do punishment. In our ethics code, it's not even allowed until after we have tried reinforcement-based interventions first. So we have to show that we've done a series of reinforcement before we can do a punishment procedure. And so for that reason, right, we can't say that all ABA is abusive because we're not even supposed to be doing punishment. But just so you know, when you add a consequence that does have a punishing effect, that's positive punishment, even though it doesn't sound positive. And when you remove a consequence that has a punishing effect, that's negative punishment. An example of positive punishment is when the police officer gives you a speeding ticket, he's giving you something, and that results in a decrease in your behavior. A negative punisher is when you take something away. And I guarantee you, anybody out there that has a teenager and you do this behavior, you can tell me that that means I am taking your iPhone. And so pulling that iPhone away from a child has a very positive effect on the behaviors that we don't want to see anymore, right? It pushes that behavior down into the direction that we want it to go. If you're up past your bedtime, you lose your phone. And that results in a true punishment effect. Okay. All right. So this slide really just summarizes everything that we've talked about. I'll give you a couple of other examples. So for those of you that partied like a rock star following the Super Bowl on Sunday, you may have had a little headache on Monday morning. And so if you wake up with a headache, that's your antecedent. Well, the having the headache is your antecedent. You partied like a rock star. That's another antecedent. But perhaps you took an aspirin. Headache, take your aspirin. What happens to your headache? It goes away. Taking aspirin, even though the act of taking an aspirin is adding something, the headache going away is the act of something being taken away, being removed. So losing that headache is negative reinforcement. On the flip side, you start drinking your coffee, you get that caffeine effect, and you're feeling really good. A positive reinforcer. You see a stop sign, you stop your car, you avoid a ticket, you avoid a crash with a kid on a bicycle, you avoid a crash with a car. Those are avoiding, which makes it a negative reinforcer. So this item is a negative reinforcer, this item is a negative reinforcer, and the second and the last are positive reinforcers. So this is that video that we don't have time to watch together. I encourage you to watch it. In it, it's where Sheldon gives Penny chocolate for the behavior that he wants to see more. We don't like to do food reinforcers or edible reinforcers because that's not, it's not healthy for people to use those. We might reserve some edibles for very, very special things like learning to pee on the potty or learning to poop on the potty, but we rarely want to use those food reinforcers if we can help it. So here's some other examples of what your student or your client may be engaging in. So the student goes to math class, they rip up their worksheet, and they get sent to the office. In the office, they get to interact with a secretary. They see all the children coming in for the day, lots of positive interactions there, right? So while it might feel like a punishing condition, good things can happen in the office. So sending children to the office is not a good idea, especially when they don't like math. I already gave the example of circle time. Maybe you've got kids in free choice or center time, so they're playing with their friends. They hit their friend, the friend runs to tattle, and now they get the toy that the friend left behind. In mealtime, they tantrum. They don't have to eat their green beans, but instead they get chicken nuggets. When they're working in their seat and they're shouting out in class and the teacher's like, raise your hand, I'm not going to call on you. all of that can serve as attention for that person, right? It's not always attention. And that's where people misstep. They're like, oh, Missy taught me in this class that this is attention seeking, so I'm going to treat it like attention seeking. But what's attention seeking for me may not be for Dina and may not be for Sandra. So we have to be very careful about who we apply the interventions to. And that's going to lead me to assessment in a moment. Boy, I just went the wrong way like 4 times. Sorry about that. My mouse is super sensitive today. There we go. So some of the terms we've already talked about, right? We talked about antecedent, we talked about behavior, we talked about consequence, we talked about reinforcers and reinforcement making behavior go up and punishment making behavior go down and punishers. And we also distinguish between positive and negative reinforcement. In positive reinforcement, the student, the learner gets something. In negative reinforcement, something is removed or avoided. So now I want to pivot and teach you some of the techniques that we use. And I think the important thing here is techniques are individually selected based on assessment. Assessment drives everything that we do. So if you have a behavior analyst who walks into your facility and they're like, Missy needs this, you should say, well, what assessment did you do? Because we are forbidden from making recommendations until we see the client, assess the client, and work with the team on coming up with what those recommendations would be. Because it's got to be tailored based on culture, based on communication skills, and based on who's going to be helping support the plan. Okay, so when we are focusing on what behaviors do we want more of, right? We want independence. We want communication. We want replacement behavior. So anything that the learner can use instead of negative or what we call challenging behaviors. We also have lots and lots of reinforcement. Reinforcement is contrived. It's not the real thing, but we program it and then we also fade it back. So if I'm working with a little and they're not in school, my goal is to get them on reinforcement levels that match the school system. And so typically teachers give attention to kids about once every 8 or 9 minutes. And so I've got to teach my kid to wait for attention until 8 minutes or 9 minutes, which is a very long time when they're used to working with someone one-on-one. Every ABA center should be working on group ABA so that kids can learn how to function in groups. Any prompts that we provide. So prompts can come in the form of a physical prompt, a verbal prompt, a gestural prompt. All those prompts have to be faded. We do not want prompts to stay in that person's environment because that makes them prompt dependent. My brother is a perfect example of a prompt dependent individual. He walks into that. So first he tells me he has to go potty and he says, and I say, oh, the bathroom's over there. A lot of people will say, do you have to potty? And as soon as they say, do you have to potty? He goes, nah. He does have to potty. That's why he said potty, right? Don't ask a nonverbal person, do they want something that they just told you that they asked for? So instead of saying, do you have to potty? I say, the potty's over there. So he'll get up and he'll go to the bathroom and then he stands in the door and he's waiting for someone to say, turn on the light, close the door. Even though he knows how to do both of those things, he has become dependent on those prompts. And so now I say things like, you know what to do, and he'll do both of those behaviors together. It's still a prompt, and I've got to work on fading that prompt. But from the day one that we start working with learners, we want to make sure that they are fading the prompts that we put into place. Another technique that we use is called shaping. And shaping is where we take a precursor behavior or an earlier version of the behavior until they can learn the final behavior. For example, when babies are born, mamas will say, mama, 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 to try to get their baby to engage in reduplicated babbling. That's what that was, reduplicated babbling. Mama, 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 da, 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 ba, 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 right? And so the first time the baby goes, mama, 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 you throw the biggest party in the world, right? said mama. He said mama. I knew he was going to say mama first. And you have this big party. And that serves to reinforce that behavior. And so the baby's like, oh, I did something really cool. And so they do it again and again and again. And so over time, mama shapes up that behavior. So it goes from mama, mama, mama to mama to mommy. And mommy stays until mommy is too tired of hearing it, right? And it's like, mommy, 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 mommy. Well, you shut up, right? So the very behavior we reinforce, we turn around to try to extinguish later when we hear it too much. But that is shaping. So shaping up that mama, mama, mama to mama to mommy. We also do something called task analysis and chaining, and that's where we teach behaviors in order or in a series of events. Putting on a coat. Think about how many steps are involved to just put on a coat or brushing your teeth. There's 20 something steps in that whole process. And so we break it down and we teach each skill until they can learn to do the entire routine. We also do a lot of modeling. So we will show a learner how to do something and then prompt them until they can do it by themselves. After trying to fly by the seat of his pants, Fred learned that good teaching requires good planning. And this is the take-home point, right? We can't just do a little bit of ABA. We have to do it consistently, but we also have to plan for it, because flying by the seat of your pants does not result in getting that desired behavior that you want. My cartoons are from this amazing guy called Michael Giangreco. He's an inclusion specialist up in the Northeast. And he's been writing about inclusion for many, many years. And then he cartoons about all kinds of fun things in the field. So prompting, you know what I'm going to do is just fly through these because we talked about each one of those procedures. Hey, Patty, do you want to play ball? And Patty makes herself nod yes. And the observer says, well, what is that odd behavior? And the teacher or the behavior analyst says, oh, she's nodding. Those are the physical prompts that I use to teach her to nod. Patty's teacher returned the book on ABA before he had a chance to read the chapter on fading. So we do not want to get stuck in prompt-dependent learners. The one thing I didn't say about modeling is that our research now on video modeling is showing that a lot of individuals can learn from video models as effectively as they can learn from live models. And you have these slides. I've already told you what each of these things are. And so that way you can refer back to the definitions and the examples. So earlier, we talked about the fact that when we're picking the goals that we're going to work on, it is always done in conjunction with other people. We never, the ABA providers should never write the goals themselves, ever. It should be done with the stakeholders, the parent, the guardian, and the learner themselves, if they are able to advocate for themselves. We always pick our goals based on assessment. And the assessment will include what are mama's priorities, what are the guardian's priorities, what are the learner's priorities. We also want to focus on age-appropriate skills. So we don't want to teach, adults with disabilities to play with dolls. That is not, I don't know a single adult that plays with dolls unless they're playing on the floor with children. And so we want to give them the skills that they can use in their life. Maybe it's learning how to play a card game. Maybe it's learning how to work an adult puzzle. Maybe it's learning how to watch TV leisurely. One of the fatal flaws that we had for my brother, we never taught him to do anything. And he does not know how to do anything for fun. Everything that he enjoys has to be done by someone else. He loves to go for car rides, but he can't drive a car. He loves to go to amusement parks, but he has no source of income. So he has to come to Sister Bank to help him pay for all of those kinds of things. But they all require someone to help him have a quality of life that he loves. And so the sooner that we can teach individuals to have leisure skills, the better their quality of life is going to be. Everything, of course, is a developmental progression. And so we do, when a parent comes to us and says, I want you to teach my child to talk. Well, I first have to say, They have to do gross motor imitation, they have to be able to do fine motor imitation, and then oral motor imitation before they're going to get those words. But I can teach them to communicate with a picture, a computer, sign language. And of course, we talked about this. We need individuals to be independent. We cannot have them relying on an ABA provider for the rest of their life. It's super expensive and doesn't make sense from an inclusion standpoint. We cannot have people with an extra body every time they need to go somewhere. And so we have an individual with a cane who appears to be blind, and he falls right into an open manhole. And so the instructor on the program says, oh, I knew I should have paid more attention to the conditions associated with that learning objective. Carl changes the conditions in his objective. Given a sidewalk route without an open manhole, Jim will safely walk home to work, from home to work. And so when we're scheduling the teaching, when we're programming the teaching, we have to think about all the environments where they're going to function and not just this one clean environment, like our ABA center. What happened here? Oh, I guess we used too low a criterion. Mrs. Walker learns the hard way that sometimes 80% is not good enough. And this is a mistake that we see in school IEPs all the time. 80% is not okay for crossing a street, right? 80% is not okay for a toilet training program. Those things need to be 100%. Feeding yourself also needs to be 100%. And so if you work with individuals who are still in the school system, help them get IEPs that have the appropriate goals. And then if you're writing an ISP, help get that ISP written to an appropriate level. Mrs. Worthy, I hope you like our new computerized individual education plans. They allow us to have all of our goals be the same. Mrs. Smithfield fails to notice the contradiction. Individualized. ISP stands for Individualized Service Plan. And so we have a responsibility to write this ISP that helps that learner or that adult function in their world and not some computerized program that looks like everybody else. Now, when we talk about decreasing behaviors, because I said we want to increase behaviors, decrease behaviors, maintain behaviors, and generalize behaviors. We do have to focus on decreasing behaviors, but we're not going to use punishment to do that. So we always use reinforcement first. We have to do an assessment, and then our plan is based on that assessment. So the assessment that we use is called the Functional Behavior Assessment. You may have heard it referred to as an FBA, and that's where we come in and understand, why is Missy smacking people during circle time? Why is that child spitting out broccoli? Why is that child having tantrums during their toileting routine? Why is Mac touching people at the restaurant? Right? These are all questions that can be answered by an appropriate assessment, which has multiple steps and involves multiple people. We don't have time to go over an FBA today, but I can assure you that when it's done, it does give you information that helps you write a great plan. And so your plan will include lots of amazing interventions that, again, are designed to prevent behavior, to increase replacement behaviors, increase appropriate behaviors, while simultaneously having a decreasing effect on those other behaviors. Some common interventions, right? We talked about it, reinforcement, but there's also differential reinforcement where we use reinforcement differentially. So when the child does the behavior that we want them to do, they get cheers. And when they have a tantrum first, but then they finally stand up and come line up, then we'll say, thank you for coming to line up, and it won't be a party, right? I'm reinforcing it differently than when you did it right on the first time. FCT is a very common intervention where we teach communication in place of that behavior. I think one of the other myths that didn't make it to my top 10 is everybody thinks the behavior plan is Johnny's behavior plan. The behavior plan is written for the adults. It's written for us to know what to do to prevent the behavior. It's written for us to know what to do to teach those replacement behaviors. It's written for us to know what to do when the behavior happens. How do we respond? So we use this process called PBIS, which is based on the science of human behaviors, which is ABA. We use practical interventions that can be implemented in multiple environments. They're based on assessment. They always teach communication. They always increase independence. And we do have to take data to make sure that they're actually affected. And then finally, we want to include the social and cultural values of the people that we're working with. We need to see behavior across all environments, not just where we're working. So PBIS is not the same plan for all children. It's not completed in a meeting, right? The assessment has to happen, the intervention is developed, and then the intervention is implemented and monitored. We can't tuck it away in a file cabinet because we have to implement it. We have to know what it means. And we never, ever have restraint or seclusion written into any plan. Restraint is not an intervention. And so I do like to run people through a belief system. When a student doesn't know how to drive, what do? We teach. When a child doesn't know how to wash her hands, what do? We teach. When a person doesn't know how to read, what do? We teach. But when someone doesn't know how to behave, our society wants to jump to punishment. Oops, why did my punishment not pop up? Interesting. It's like I'm missing a bullet there. So it's supposed to have a bullet in a frown face that basically says we punish. And so punishment should be a thing of our past, and we should really focus on those replacement behaviors. I have a couple of slides about data, because if you don't know where you're going, how we know if you ever get there. We had a crazy situation the other day here in Naples where 2 engines stopped working and a plane crashed right on our freeway. But you can take data in a variety of ways, right? Frequency, duration. We don't have time to learn those today. But most ISPs do have some form, right, of data collection where you're monitoring individual progress. So the last piece that I want to cover is the standards, if you will, about what's happening in our field. And we do know that a lot of folks have an interest in ABA and in ABA programs across the country. So, you should be able to do this little checklist quickly before you start working with an ABA provider. For sure, there has to be a BCBA. The BCBA has to be involved, and they have to have frequent involvement, which is about 1 hour of BCBA time for every 10 hours of ABA therapy. This is different from a consult, right? I think about the BCBA at Sunrise, who consults to the nurses and to the direct care staff on my brother's plan. She's consulting, and then she trains them to do some techniques. But ABA is not actually happening in my brother's house, right? He's in an ICF, and so it's basically staffing and oversight and safety, not ABA. In an ABA program, their procedures are implemented by trained providers. Most companies train to an RBT level. In Medicaid in Florida, they have to be RBTs in order to deliver the therapy. A good ABA program has ongoing data collection that's graphed on a regular basis, so you can see progress and see how the student is doing or how the individual is doing. The programs that the BCBA develops with the parent, the programs are adjusted based on the data that are collected in the system. And then, one of the things I haven't said here enough is when I say parent, I'm assuming that the person's under 18, but recognizing that you all work with adults, we need to have the individual at the table if they're able to advocate for themselves. My brother coming to his meetings results in mayhem because he doesn't like to be there. It's very challenging for him. And all he wants to do is engage in behaviors that get him out. So he comes, he says hi, and then he leaves, and we we focus together around his plan. And then you would need to involve other providers, right? Anybody else that's touching that individual's life should also be at the table. Student data is extremely valuable, but not if it's half-baked. Hey, what are you doing with our data? Oh, when I started, it was raw data. It's still not done. This is me showing you all, you have to have graphs. Having papers piled up in a filing cabinet or piled up on your desk don't really show us how the child is making progress or how the individual is making progress. So I know TheraP is an app that a lot of programs use and can graph data for you. That's what we need, right? We need that data graphed on a regular basis. In this one, Rodney is caught with his pants down, writing goals and objectives without family input. We do not want to write our ISPs without the individual and their parents at the table. So the other thing that you might see is ABA services happening in homes, in schools. You might have a comprehensive program where they're working on every area of development, but you might also have a focused ABA program where they're working on one or two things. And then you may have some folks who are consulting to your program or to a public school. But the last thing I want to show you that there are standards in the industry. Right now, the BACB, which is the group that certifies behavior analysts, they created the original standards, and they're now maintained by CAS, which is the Council of Autism Service Providers. They're hot linked in here, so you should be able to hop over to their website and get those downloaded. This is version 2.0, and I hear they're getting ready to put out 3.0, but in their guidelines, they really highlight, all the things that I just taught you about, which is these are the expectations, these are the things that you would want to see in a quality ABA program. And we have 8 minutes for some Q&A. Make you the host. There you go.
So we can open it up for questions. People will need to, I can go through and unmute, or you can raise your hand. I don't see.
You can type it in the chat too, because I've got the chat open.
We will send out a copy of the presentation. We are going to put it on our YouTube channel by the end of the week for you to review and share.
I just dropped another copy for those of you that came in a little bit later. Hey, Alan. I dropped another copy into the chat, so you can access the handout there too.
Hey, Dr. Olive, first of all, we really appreciate you doing this. We had hundreds to sign up. We had about 100 that were here, but we also tape it. So a lot of people can't make it because their days are busy, but this was a very important thing. We're glad we finally got this, got you to be able to do this. One thing I was curious about, your conference you have, and I went last year, it was amazing. Is that primarily for providers? Would people other than ABA providers go to that, or is it primarily just for ABA providers?
That's a great question, Alan, and thank you all again for having me. Alan and I met as part of my role in FABA. It is primarily a conference for behavior analysts. We welcome parents anytime they want to come and learn more. We hope that RBTs will also, or direct care staff will start coming. We recognize it's hard for them to take off work to make it to the event, because the conference, we have workshops on Wednesday and the conference is Thursday, Friday, and a half a day on Saturday. We're looking at taking Saturday and making it also a day of sessions, because direct care staff are more likely to have Friday off. And so that gives them the opportunity to come. 2024's conference is down in Miami at the Turnberry, the Marriott, JW Marriott Turnberry. It's like a big golf estate. And so we're expecting another big crowd. If you come and stay in the hotel, it includes access to their water park. And so it could be a fun family vacation. And the rates are less than $200 a night, which is pretty darn good for a JW. So yeah, we'll welcome you. you just might be a little bored in some of the sessions, but like last year, a parent of a person with autism and the person with autism came and spoke about some of their experiences with ABA. So that was always good to hear. We had a panel that Alan, that you were on, where we talk about some of, we like to do a current state of the state. So what is actually happening, you know, in the field, and ABA touches everything, right? We touch adult services, we touch infant services, we touch a wide variety of things. And so it's nice to hear from everybody that comes into contact with it. Thank you all for your kind comments. Sandra.
You should be able to unmute.
There you go.
Okay, so thank you.
Yeah.
This is my first meeting. I really enjoyed this. So I have a couple of things. Like, I'm in Tallahassee, Florida. In Tallahassee, Florida only has a couple of things dealing with RBT and different things like that.
Mhm.
I've been in healthcare for like almost 16 years.
Mhm.
So I have widespread, and right now I'm working with adults with disabilities, mentally and physically. I'm dealing with a couple with behaviors right now. So that has what has got me into wanting to do RBT. So I have looked at different ways of trying to get in, but I'm not sure exactly how I would even begin the process. And then second of all, would y'all ever come to, might sound crazy, would y'all ever come to Tallahassee to host a meeting for people in my situation who are really interested to be able to learn how to sign up and go from there?
Yeah. So
because
our
I have the
treasurer,
education.
yeah, our treasurer actually lives in Tallahassee, as do a couple of other, our public policy chair lives there. We have a board member who's in Tallahassee, so we have people from all over the state. So I'm sure that we could do something locally. You know, our state's big. It takes me about 6 hours to get up to Tallahassee from way down here.
Right.
So in terms of becoming an RBT, there are 3 steps involved. So the first step is that you have to take 40 hours of training, and I'll tell you where to get that in a second. The second step is that you have to have a competency check. So that means that you do the training and then you have to practice the skills on somebody. And then
Right.
the competency check is done by BCBA. So you have to find a BCBA who's going to check you out and say, yes, you passed all these skills. Once you
Right.
get that competency check, the third thing is you have to take a written test and pass that test. And so my favorite training is through Autism Partnership. They
Okay.
are a not-for-profit based out in California, and their training is free. That's why it's my favorite. Finding a BCBA, you can find a BCBA on the website bacb.com, and they will, might be .org. Anyway, they will help you find, you can look up a BCBA or ABA near your zip code. And so you can find who those folks are.
The only
These
problem
days,
is we have some, but I don't know, for some reason they're not doing any more of because I know you have to work so many hours, but the problem is we actually don't have, I don't think we do. You might know more than I do. We don't have anybody actually to do a training here in Tallahassee, as far as I know. So that causes a lot of difficulties for people in Tallahassee.
Yeah. So I don't know who provides the training there. A lot of companies, when they hire you, they provide that training up front. That's what my company does, right? They bring people on and they train them through the 40 hours, and we do the 40 hours over 2 weeks. And so they're working at a computer and they're playing with the kids, and they're working at a computer and playing with the kids so that they learn those skills and get practice. Because remember, I said early on, practice feedback.
Right.
But I'm not connected enough in Tallahassee to point you to who would be able to do that. And I did leave off. I said you have to do 3 things. The 4th thing that you have to do as an RBT, all of your work has to be supervised. And so it's supervised at 5%. And so you have to find a BCBA that can check you off, but also
Right.
that's willing to supervise you in that work. And the board has got new rules. They really want the BCBA and the RBT to be employed by the same person,
Right.
which makes it a little more challenging. Alan?
I know we're advocating together on iConnect. How's iConnect and the challenges there impacting the behavior analysts? Because a lot of providers out there relied on you and stuff, and I know we're advocating to try to ensure the legislature understands our challenges. I know you guys seem to have a few more challenges than others because a lot of your analysts may only have a few clients, and the investment in time to handle a few clients might be a challenge.
Yep. So FABA has a public policy committee that works on several different things, right? And we have a whole branch in that committee that works just on adult issues, which is where APD falls. And so for us, APD, we try to meet with them on a regular basis to give them feedback on the iConnect and how it needs to be improved. But the other piece is, as an employer, mandating training. So APD mandated training for people on iConnect. So the employer, if you have an employee and you make the employee do something, you have to pay them for that. So now APD is mandating this training that all these companies had to pay for. So now they're paying people to learn about something that's quite broken. And so we continue to meet with them on a regular basis. I do know another area of training that they're interested in is related to human trafficking, because our loved ones are more likely to be at risk for being taken advantage of. And so we need to train providers to recognize signs of it and to help people self-advocate so that they don't get into a terrible trafficking situation. And so we've met with them to discuss some possible training routes there. But Ellen, we still need to partner together on that very item related to iConnect, because the more they hear consistent feedback across providers, the better it's going to be.
Well, again, we appreciate you doing this for our providers. I'm glad you're out there advocating for what we need. I know you guys are making a big difference with your leadership, and hope to come to your conference again this year. It was
That'd be great to have you.
And it was really a good conference. Anything else, Dina? I know the time's up. We just want to let you know we appreciate you,
Thank
Dr.
you. And Ellen, they all have my emails throughout the handout, so people can email me depending on what their need is at one of my 3 email addresses. Okay?
Thanks so much, Missy.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Thank you.